Okay, hi everyone. Very warm welcome to you all. My name is Chris Borg, Policy Manager at NELC. It's my pleasure today to be chairing today's online event at NELC on Beyond the Precept, Exploring Alternative Income Sources. First, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping announcements, some of which are shown on the slide on the screen. Do use the Q&A function throughout the event for questions to our speakers, our three fantastic speakers, if you have them. There will be, of course, a full slot for Q&A later, and the chat function to interact with your fellow delegates and to share any information or links. If you require any technical support, please do post those queries into the chat, and my NELC colleague Liv will do her best to help you. The closed caption feature, i.e. subtitles, can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. This follows feedback from one or two previous NELC events. For desktop and laptop users, to turn on closed captions, please select Show Captions. The button will be labeled CC. If the button isn't visible, please select the three dots on the bottom right corner of the screen. Then please select Captions, and after that, you'll be prompted to show Clip Captions, so please select that option. If you're using a mobile device or tablet, please scroll across the menu on the bottom of your screen and select Captions. You'll then need to click Show Captions. And then once the captions are on, you can access a live transcription of the event. If you selected the closed caption feature, please use the reactions feature, the next button on the right of the closed caption feature, by ticking the yes button, a green emoji with a tick to show us that the closed captions are working at your end. Again, if anyone is experiencing any technical difficulties, that speaker or delegate, please let us know in the chat and we'll try to rectify the issue for you. After the event, i.e. by the end of tomorrow, we'll be sending out, there are 3 slide decks today, so all 3 of those brilliant slide decks will be attached to any post-event mailing and other links and information that speakers would like to highlight to you. And obviously, we'll be inviting you to feedback on today's online event. So at the end of the event, just before you go, 1:15, please do look out for the Zoom feedback form, which should pop up on your screens following the conclusion of the webinar. Literally, as you're about to leave, that props up, and that will be about a 2-second job to complete. Next slide, please, Liv. So we'd obviously, of course, like to thank our sponsors at NELC, who the main 3 are Clear, CCLA and Blashyear Illuminations, for their extensive support for today's NELC online event, and indeed for all of our current 25/6 financial year online events. And moving on, Liv, please, the next slide. So session title and speakers, yeah. So following the 2012 government administration, that seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it? Parish and town councils have avoided caps on council tax increases, but more is needed to guarantee a stable income for them. Many councils still face challenges securing grants, especially when they can't directly apply for government grants, as we know famously. This event will equip you today with the knowledge to uncover alternative sustainable income sources that parish and town councils can currently tap into for different projects and services or general purposes. Today, you'll discover various sources of non-precept revenue available and how some fantastic councils do that. And learn how to effectively apply for and secure funding from certain, leading national organisations, or how it's been done in 2 brilliant instances that you'll hear about today, and hear from parish and town councils which have successfully navigated the funding landscape. Of course, as well as from a principal authority. Nick's here today to tell us about, from a principal authority perspective, about the support available, but then also very often the boxes that principal authorities are looking for to be ticked to help, especially in a cultural kind of domain, projects to be supported, and secured vital resources to enhance, these councils' brilliant services. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to be joined today by our brilliant panel of speakers: Sarah Foote, Clerk at Lowestoft Town Council; Linda Larter, long-standing Chief Executive at Sevenoaks Town Council in Kent; and Councillor Nick Hookway, portfolio holder for culture, leisure, sport and tourism at East Devon District Council. So first up, we've got Sarah, and I'm going to hand over to you, Sarah, to speak to your brilliant slide deck, which I think Liv is going to put into slideshow mode for you.
Thank you, Chris. We'll just wait to see the slides, and there we go. Great, thank you all. So first of all, to give you some context, from where I sat in England's most easterly point. Lowestoft Town Council was formed in 2017 via a local government reorganisation order. Lowestoft Town Council is now one of the largest town councils in England, with 20 councillors over 7 wards, an electorate of 55,000 and a budget of 2.2 million. Next slide, please, Liv. We were gifted a significant portfolio of assets through the reorganisation order, estimated to have a value of £12 million by the then Waveney District Council. The Waveney District Council then went on to merge with Suffolk Coastal District Council to create East Suffolk Council, which some delegates may realise is the largest district council area in England. Included in the asset transfer was a Grade 2 redundant town hall, which was the former Waveney District Council offices, a theatre in need of refurbishment and upgrading of equipment, and a range of public open spaces, parks, play areas, allotments. To note, none of these assets that were gifted over to the new town council achieved any income whatsoever for the town council. Next slide, Liv. So the impact of the local government order on the people of our town, which is one of the most socially deprived in England, was a new council. There was no referendum to decide if there should be a Lowestoft Town Council or not. Previously, our residents have paid council tax to the Suffolk County Council and the District Council, but not to a local council. Next slide. So we have a new council on the 1st of April 2017, 20 councillors, 4 members of staff, I was there at the start, and a precept which is set by the District Council for us of 1.3 million. And keep that figure in mind as you continue to listen to the Lowestoft story. Next slide. So where do you start? So you've all the usual council work to deliver, but you also have what some might refer to as a white elephant sitting in the centre of your town, and that is now in your ownership. And it is the town hall that I'm going to use as the case study for my presentation this morning. So our first step was to appoint some consultants to consider the feasibility of the building. This piece of work involved early engagement with our residents via surveys, open events, opinions from consultants of every shape and form, and concluded to return the building to a public facility with council offices going back into the building. However, how much that was likely to cost, and if it was in fact possible, required yet more expert opinion and would, of course, cost money. At the early stage of the council's existence, it would have been difficult to justify any increase in a precept being served on the people of our town, who were then only first getting used to paying a new chunk of precept to this new Lowestoft Town Council. Next slide. So the feasibility study concluded with this position statement, and this has been the ethos for all our work to obtain funding to date. It is that we should restore this iconic and historic building in the centre of our town at the heart of our community. But how should we go about doing this? Next slide. So the first round of funding that we entered into is what was called development stage work, and you have a design feasibility project. And in order to even do this, you need to consider getting some funding. So how you're going to get a chunk of funding to work out if you need to apply for more funding. So what you explore is what is possible with the building that you have and what can be achieved through terms of renovation and extension. We were lucky to have the support, and you'll start to see a theme. It's a historic building, so our funders are from the heritage sector mainly. Okay, so you'll start to see a theme in the names that I'm showing you that we had our support from. So we had a design feasibility project that cost us £500,000, and these were the funders that backed us at the start of this project. We also had a town council contribution, and you can, in these funding projects, account for volunteer time as well. So the development work concluded that we had a £10 million project ahead of us if we wanted to renovate the town hall back into public use. And at this stage, I asked you to remember that initial precept of 1.3 million and to see why we needed to think beyond the precept. We were grateful that these organisations were willing to support us in establishing how the building could be renovated, and we started to take our next step in the journey. But that was paused, something called COVID, and as many of you may be aware, that ultimately saw an increase in all costs. And when we went to start work in 2024, we actually had a building project of £12 million in front of us. Next slide, please. So how could we deliver? We knew what we wanted. We had designs, we had plans, we had every possible survey that you could imagine, from sniffer dogs going around the building to bat experts, not just one type of asbestos survey, 2 or 3 types of asbestos. So how could we actually deliver? How could we get builders on site? So we were lucky enough to achieve the funding that I've listed here. And we didn't discount asking our principal authority, East Suffolk Council, and we remain grateful for their for their support in this. And we had to obviously get approval to borrow. We are entering into a public works loan as well. So how did we achieve 2 substantial rounds of funding for both the development and delivery stage of our project? Next slide, please, Liv. 2 of the biggest issues when securing grant funding, so I'm now going to talk from our experience and hopefully that will be useful to you, are firstly establishing need. We established the need through expert appraisal for not just the building, but what our community wanted. Establishing need then tells funders why they should invest in change and that the change is wanted. Establishing need also involves demonstrating the outcomes. What will change as a result of the investment that will be both beneficial and measurable, i.e. the building will be transformed into community space and home to the heritage of the town. Evidencing competence gives your funders confidence. You'll need to pay for expert help to develop your case to the standard that quality and large-scale funders expect, and in funders' language. These amounts of funding are much more than completing an application form. Funders will expect quality and detailed documentation. You need to think in-depth business plans, surveys, budgets, and accounts. Think showing that you are a good risk and you can control both the budget and the timetable for your project. Fail to get this right and not appreciate the work involved and the likely cost in putting in the bids, and you'll never achieve anything beyond the precept. Next slide, please. So if you do get it right, and you're fortunate as we were to achieve all that external funding, you can then look forward to your project progressing. And yes, that was 5 years in the making. It looks like maybe a group of builders standing around not doing much, but it's actually some of our councillors having a tour round once the site was handed over to the construction company appointed through the usual tendering process. It's all really exciting stuff for us now. Next slide, please. So lessons learned, and it's been a lot of lessons to learn. I think firstly, given today is titled Beyond the Precept, I think to be realistic, you need precept to be able to achieve funding. If we hadn't been able to commit to the original feasibility study and outsource the expert help that we needed, we wouldn't be able to have submitted the grant applications. You can never underestimate the time and detail required to make credible submissions to funders, or the cost of getting the external help to help you do this. And once you're lucky, do not think you can thank the funders for the money and that's that. We have regular progress reports, site meetings with our funders. We have activity plans of what we're going to deliver while the building project is underway. All involve community engagement. We have evaluation consultants who evaluate every step of what we're doing to make sure it's on brief and sits with our original funding applications. Accountability is expected by the funders for the duration of the building and beyond. That's our case from here in the east of England, and I'll be taking questions at the end of the session, I believe. Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks very much indeed, Sarah. That was fantastic. Really inspirational story about how the council is saving its, real time town hall and all that effort, all that grant funding. And yes, wouldn't want the title of today's online event to be in any way deceptive. Of course, councils need the precept, but it's how to use that, isn't it? As your council has so fantastically done to leverage in and match fund from additional external sources. As you're about to hear from more of, I think, from Linda Larter, Clerk of Sevenoaks Town Council. Over to you, Linda. If you could, Liv, please screen share Linda's slides. Thanks.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chris. Hope people find this useful. We're all chasing the same pots of money, probably. So, okay, can go straight on to the next slide. So just a bit about my council, where I'm currently working. I always say currently in case I'm thinking of moving on. So we've got just under £2 million turnover. Our precept is just over 1.5 million, and we have 22% from other sources. And lots of councils do that, and it depends on what else you do, whether you can generate it from sports pitches, community halls, etc. And some councils are lucky enough to own car parks and have very low precepts, or in some cases no precept. Just to say that this turnover relates only to revenue, it doesn't relate to any of our capital projects. So next slide, please. I expect all of you do this, so I'm just laying out the different options other than the precepts investments. I presume all of you will put your funds into higher interest reserve accounts if you're not using them. A lot of parish and town councils use CCLA. This year, it's the first year that we've moved to something different, an investment platform. Took me a while to get used to this, I have to say personally. We use one called Insignis, and that has returned double the amount of interest that we would previously have got, which has been very welcomed in this year. So next slide, please. There's lots of opportunities for grants. I'm sure you know many of them. The National Lottery, depending on what your topic is. We just heard about heritage, but there's arts and sports. I've just given an example of the grant funding we've had in the last calendar year, which is about £2 million, and it's made up of all different grants. Hopefully everybody is applying for Awards for All. You can have up to £20,000 every 2 years. We use it £10,000 per year. It's one of the few grants that pays for revenue, so we claim £10,000 a year for our youth cafe staff. And then there's obviously specialists like Football Foundation, and principal councils often have topical grants like transport. We've just got some money for a bus and applying for another minibus, member grants, etc. And there is a directory of national grants as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned by Sarah, I don't think you should underestimate the amount of effort it takes to get these grants, especially the larger ones in Sarah's case. I always say to councillors that you should set aside approximately 10% for what you want to achieve, and that's on a sliding scale. Obviously, a small grant of 20,000. You still need to set aside money, maybe for planning, maybe for something else, or drawings, etc., right up to the very big ones that Sarah's talked about. The advice, fellow clerks, I rely heavily on fellow clerks. I recommend locality. If you join that, there's a lot of very practical advice about business plans, especially when you get into the far larger applications. Next slide, please. We also have a town team. It's actually within our council, but we call it town team, and it has a lot of partners. We put out a brochure every year saying to businesses, do you want to sponsor all these opportunities? And that ranges from Christmas lights to mayor's events to band events, etc. We don't get a huge amount of money from that. As I said, in the last year we got £16,000. That ranges from £500 to 2,000 individual sponsorship, but it all helps, especially for events. Next slide, please. And then there's traditional ways, buy a brick, etc. One of our current projects is a new football pavilion, and the football club are themselves raising £350,000 towards that. And you can see below we're contributing £205,000, but the rest is coming from external sources. Next slide, please. And then perhaps a bit less traditional for town and parish councils is crowdfunding. So we've done this 3 times now. We don't try not to do it very regularly, go out and ask, please give your council some money. The last time we did it was last year for this Long Spring Woods, which was 14 acres of heritage woods, and it was likely to go for sale. And we knew it was going to cost 200,000. We had about 100,000 that we could comfortably find. We went out to the public and we had donations of in excess of the other £100,000 in 23 days. We also had people volunteering to litter pick or do whatever we needed to do if they didn't have the money. So it was a real community project. And even we had a letter from the King at the end of it to say thank us for saving these woods. So that went down well with the public. Next slide, please. In the world we live in, working, everything's changing on a very regular basis, almost weekly it feels. And one of the things that's quite high on our radar is biodiversity net gains. We were focused on it quite a lot in our neighbourhood development plan. But what has become clear is that some developers who are now required to do 10% can't do it on their own site. And so they have to buy in somewhere to do their biodiversity net gain. And there isn't anywhere registered in our district. So the last one we had was somewhere in Suffolk or something. We obviously want to keep that within the town. So we are going through, and I don't know that we can do it, but a very lengthy process to register our open spaces. And then technically, and this is quite crudely put on, but technically we will then be able to sell a unit of £40,000 to developers when they're told in the planning regulations you need 10 units of biodiversity net gain and you can't do it on your site, you need to buy it from elsewhere. So hopefully they will buy it from us instead of somewhere elsewhere in the country. So that's my few slides, and as we say, we're happy to answer questions at the end.
Fantastic. Thanks very much indeed, Linda. Really outstanding slide deck. And yeah, your council with you at the helm as the chair there, sorry, as the clerk there, sorry, has always been really instrumental with levering funding in from external sources, as well as using the precept really ingeniously for all the time I've known you as clerk of Sevenoaks Town Council. So, you know, carry on doing that fantastic job there. And I'm sure that all the delegates who are on today's online event will derive a lot of inspiration and advice from your helpful slide deck. Okay, now let's hear the principal authority angle from yourself, Nick Okway, who's the relevant cabinet member for culture and tourism at East Devon District Council, and who's done some work in this area with parish councils before. Over to you, Nick, and please screen share Nick's slide deck. Liv, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to talk at a much more sort of general level, really, about culture and how to find it, and the strategy, gaining hold of your stakeholders, protecting your assets and boosting the local economy. So I am the portfolio holder at East Devon District Council. East Devon is a large, mainly rural district in Devon, but we have a number of coastal towns that have their own town councils, and I sit on Exmouth Town Council, so I can talk from sort of both sides. So next slide, please, Chris. So firstly, a definition of what is culture. I had that question once from a councillor. What do you mean by culture? And it is probably best thought of as a spectrum of activities that residents engage in. And it can be anything at all. Painting, ceramics, music, photography, sculpture. Those are sort of things that we generally think about, but there are plenty of others. And the point that I need to make really is that if you're in a slightly rural area, those residents are going to be scattered. Your groups, your cultural groups, they will be fragmented geographically. They're all over the place, but they are out there. Right, and it's your job to find these people and get them together. So networking is an absolutely key aspiration. They need to be encouraged. They need to be assured that the council is happy with what they're doing. And sometimes you literally give them the blessing. Somebody comes up with an idea. Oh, can I start a new cultural centre? Sounds a great idea. Why don't you give it a go? And providing reassurance and support. It may not be financial support. It may just be officer support. It may be a council support of social media. But you need to reassure them that what they're doing is valuable. So next slide, please, Chris. So how do you do this? I can't recommend having a cultural strategy highly enough. A cultural strategy sets out exactly what you want to achieve with culture in your district or your town. It's wide-ranging, it's long-term, and it sets out clear objectives. And it's very helpful indeed for a whole range of people within the community of knowing what you want to do. Now, if you're a town council, perhaps as one of the smaller town councils, then a stated position might be a very clear idea. You might have a working party, as some of the town councils in my area do. They have like a festivals and events working party, and they have a clear stated objective. So again, I cannot strongly emphasize the need for an events officer. It can be quite a short-term post, but coordinating events throughout the year in your area is work for an officer. And there are plenty of people out there who want to do this type of work. It's very rewarding, gives great job satisfaction, and fits in very well indeed with things like school holidays and so on. So an events officer is something you should aim for. And you might even want to share one with another council, but you do need to have an events officer that will go out and achieve your strategy. So obviously use social media to raise awareness. Do contact the Arts Council, cultural strategies, festivals, working parties, events officers. Do gain Arts Council grants. The Arts Council isn't just about London and opera and so on. It is looking to help localities. The other thing which is really important about culture is that you can use it to protect your assets because you show need. People can say, well, we want to protect this asset. Local people use it. It's as simple as that, in my view. And finally, and really important, and one of the things that's been really critical for us in East Devon is that festivals and events that you run throughout the year will attract visitors, and that boosts local businesses. If you think about how hospitality has been hit over the recent years, hospitality wants to have visitors coming into your area. So any sort of event, it could be a music event, it can be a food event, it could be a sport event, some sort of special interest, anything that's going on. All these events, if they run throughout the year, run by your events officer, will boost local economy Businesses want this, and that's the really important message I think we need to say here. So next slide, please, Chris. So in terms of protecting assets, I just wanted to say a bit more about that, because one of the things that we've noticed very well indeed is that cultural assets are welcomed by developers and investors. When residents complained about lack of infrastructure in development and new developments, it's cultural assets that actually help to meet this. And that could literally be a library, a small library. In Devon, because we're so diverse and spread out, we don't have enough libraries. But if you think about what's going on in places like Manchester, where they've used cultural assets to have huge regeneration projects, then things like libraries have been key to that. So assets, whatever they do, bring people to one place, right? Getting people to one place is what businesses want. So the other thing that I think we need to think about is your assets could be almost anything. Now, we've had a fantastic example of a disused town hall, but it can be a library, it can be a theatre, it can be an old cinema, it can even be a gallery. We're very lucky we have a gallery in East Devon. It's a grade 2 listed building. You can't really do much else with it. As a gallery, it's been a big success. So there are also other disused spaces. But I think you should ask yourself, do you have other assets there? Possibly, do you have a leisure facility that's not working very well? So I'll come on to that one in a minute. So on the other side of the slide, you know, options appraisals take time. And if you've got local government reorganisation hanging over you, as we have in East Devon and in Devon as a whole, that could be an issue. I would actually say, do think about increasing your precept. This has been done in Devon and has not raised much objection. You will find, I'm pretty certain you will find, that most of your residents want to see community assets and events and will be prepared to see a small increase. You could look at setting up a community interest company. That's always well worth doing. We've had that happen in Exmouth. They can struggle and they need to have very clear and affordable repayments, but it's an option. So the other thing is, could you lease your asset out to an operator, such as a leisure operator? Leisure operators do take on cultural assets. And at the time, of course, we're thinking about our economy, we're thinking about best value. Now, if you are uncertain about how your assets are handling, how they're creating value, then you could go through a procurement exercise to identify best value, and finding out if you have an operator in the area who'd want to take it on, or a national operator who'd want to take it on. It may be worth doing. It's not a bad idea, because at the moment there are quite a few leisure operators that seem to be quite keen and quite flexible in what assets they take on. So I just wanted to put that one out there for people to think about. So next slide, please. So boosting the local economy. So cultural activities of all forms do have a significant impact upon your economy at all levels. Now, culture, and it depends where you're starting from. If you're starting from a low level, it will take time. But if you have cultural activities going on throughout the year, it is significant. So there are several towns in my district where there's a cultural activity going on every weekend of the summer season. There are other assets that we have, like gardens, which are very nice, and those are used for weddings. And having a wedding in a town is another significant benefit to a business. There's big money in weddings. So I would suggest to you that over time you have a regular program of events, and it's whatever suits your town, your locality. So events help to promote local products and identities. We have one that's based around food. We call it Gate to Plate. So people can see what products are grown locally and can hopefully buy them. Events do improve social cohesion. They bring people together and they definitely aid health and well-being. And events will get media coverage. There's no doubt about that. And some of the media coverage you will provide, but other media coverage can be quite effective and surprising. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please, Chris. So other benefits, well, we've talked about health and well-being. That's absolutely key. Certainly in East Devon. East Devon has a very elderly population, and getting people out of their homes is a really important point, something to do. And having an event actually gives them the reason to do that. We are encouraging active travel. There's a lot of demand of active travel in here. We have problems with not having enough bus services, not having enough public transport. So anything you can get people out to be active and use active travel is great. So cultural assets are key elements in placemaking. If you've got involved with that, do make sure that's involved. We've talked about Manchester. The other thing about cultural benefit culture is that it helps to meet council plan objectives. It depends on how your council thinks, of whether it's fairly traditional or forward thinking. But if you've got council plan objectives, cultural activities can be very, very effective in doing that. They can also help in dealing with issues like climate change. By having a cultural activity that puts forward a different point of view, you can actually get across some ideas that can be perhaps controversial, perhaps unknown to your local population. Also, culture helps with environmental issues. In Devon, environment is very important. It's one of the reasons why people come to visit us, and environment is under pressure. Like most of you, we have a water company that we're very unhappy with, and anything that talks about benefiting the environment that comes from a cultural point of view is very positive and very effective. And it can be that you want to put across a different point of view on a controversial topic. I'm not going to delve into that one at the moment in great detail for obvious reasons, but cultural activities can be very good for that. And also, where you have cultural activities going on and they go into schools, that's also a very, very important point. And that's a whole other ball game. If you've got an academy that isn't very responsive to what you want them to do, then sometimes having cultural events and getting those cultural events into schools can be very, very useful. So next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so this is my final one. I thought I'd start off by talking about the theatre's trust, because if you have a theatre that's in trouble, for example, it's not making money, or it needs renovation or maintenance, the Theatres Trust is a London-based trust that's free to access and gives some really solid advice. I didn't know much about this at all. Somebody told me, and I contacted them, and I learned a great deal. They are very reassuring and giving you the national picture, and may well be that that little piece of inspiration that you need may well come for them. So that's one of the most important things, I think, because they're not really that well known. So consultancy. There are some really excellent consultancy firms who will advise you on cultural strategies. Yes, you'll have to go through some form of procurement exercise, but it's excellent value, and your cultural strategy will stand scrutiny if you use these consultancy firms. When I'm talking about excellent value, I'm talking about £25,000, thereabouts, significantly cheaper than anything to do with property. And I think in many ways much better for it. Of course, there's the LGA. They run a whole series of courses about managing culture. There is a document that was around called Cultural Strategy in a Box, which you can download. That's well worth having a look at if you're really strapped for funds. And if you can't find it, then I've got a copy. We can pass that down through Chris, I'm sure. Clearly, the Arts Council, if you've got good relationships with the Arts Council, they need to be nurtured. It varies, as I understand it, across the country. And but again, you do need to get the Arts Council on your side. Networking is key. You do need to get out there and network, not only within your own district, perhaps with other councils. You might be able to work with other local neighbouring councils, but networking is absolutely important, and events like this are really crucial. And the final thing to say is, well, good luck, because it's not a difficult thing to achieve once you've stated what you want. And this is why your cultural strategy or stated position is really important. Once you've done that, you can move forward with residents. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Fantastic. Again, thanks so much, Nick. A really, really full alternative angle to look at this. I didn't know you were an expert town councillor. Could tell you were extremely active in local government and an expert in this area. Thanks so very much for coming today, because I know you're very busy. But that was truly fascinating and really adds to what Linda and Sarah's brilliant presentations kind of lent. Now, listen, I've been looking at the Q&A posted into the Q&A box as you've all been talking. More have latterly been posted in there. There are some statements, there are some questions. There are some questions which are slightly duplicated. So what I'm going to do now is we're at 3 minutes more time than I think we'd anticipated. So, thanks all speakers for sticking to time. That's brilliant. We're going to take questions from the Q&A box for our panelists. The ones generically which can be answered by every speaker, not just by a named speaker. So please do continue to put your questions in there, and also to upvote them. You can, by putting a thumbs up on there, indicate which questions you're really keen to get answers to if you don't want to ask a question yourself, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. But from the list, I'll sort of take it question time sort of style. The ones I've identified so far, which I think everyone can answer. There's one here by Alice Gator Wildgust, who says, interesting to see about volunteer time being costed. This is a general principle, presumably, but with big pressure on small numbers of paid staff. Again, something which Nick would probably apply at every level of local government these days. And an overstretched town clerk, how is time costed? So a general question, but if you could just try to answer it, or please, based on your own experiences. Sarah, can I throw that one at you first?
You can. So how is our time involved in the projects costed?
Yeah, how is staff time, particularly on the Heritage Project, probably in your case, costed or allocated?
I don't believe it was. External consultant time was costed. I think there was another question that I saw came up about, was external help sought? And yes, it was. We have a project manager to deliver the project, and that's an external cost. But I don't think there was any accounting of my time or my colleagues' time. No. Whether there should have been or not, I don't know. There's obviously our funding that we put towards the project.
Presumably also, Sarah and Linda, particularly, it would also depend on the grant giver and whether or not they were asking for staff time to be listed or costed or budgeted.
Yeah.
Maybe that depends. Sorry, Linda, over to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So I think when you've done a couple of the bigger ones, you realise just how time consuming it is, not only for applying for the funds and getting through the system, but afterwards it can almost become a full-time job to do all the reporting, the analysis and the regular monthly reports, etc. So one of the things I've always done going forward is I put in a nominal project management fee, which will cover costs. And I learned that at my cost in early and in the case sometimes that has been to give me somebody else, so that if I feel that if I have the skill set to do it, then somebody else can do some of the day-to-day stuff and I can transfer some of my time. But when you get into bigger projects, you really do need that extra resource, I think. So it is something you learn the more you do.
Brilliant. Nick,
so I guess to give a more
sorry.
helpful answer, our staff time on our project is covered through the external project management fee. So yes, you do need to have staff time. And as Linda said, you cannot underestimate. It's almost like the creation of a brand new committee for your council, the reporting work, the meetings, the project delivery expectations of the funders. So yes, obviously there is a staff time, but here in this particular instance, mainly that's covered by our project manager's fee.
Understood. Horses for courses, I guess. Nick, any broad principles you've got to impart on this, either from an East Devon perspective or from an Exmouth perspective? Have either of your councils or at principal authority level, have you had to allocate staff time against particular projects, cultural projects perhaps, that you've been involved in?
Yes. So at district level, we have a cultural producer who supports all organisations and the town councils. And one of her really important roles is to provide access to training, networking and grant application providers. At town council, the Exmouth Town Council has its own events officer, which is part of the financial program of the council on a yearly basis, and that events officer organises throughout the year all events, but there are other, to be honest, there are other events that are organised by other officers as well. So the one that I mentioned to do with Gate to Plate is organised by one of the economics team. And the other point I should have made is that there is a very close link in East Devon between what we do at a cultural level and what we do with tourism, and we link the two together. So we have a map which has the district and shows what cultural events are going on throughout the year in the district. And that cultural tourism map has proved to be very popular. Yes, that has time. Yes, we have agents who do some of this work for us and so on. Yes, it is expensive, but, and I think this is a very important point, money spent on culture and even on tourism has a very high return. It's a relatively small, right? Okay, you've got officer cost, you may have cost for an annual budget, but the impact of getting that money back through local businesses, supporting local businesses in particular, and also supporting the cultural events, because some cultural events are self-funding if they've been going a long time. So it is, I think, a bigger picture to look at. It isn't just about the cost. It's about thinking about, yes, we can invest in officer time. We can put some money into this project. What are we going to get out of it? And what you get out of it is significantly more than what you put in. Thank you.
No, absolutely. A bit like Linda's point from the kind of investment platforms and stuff. I think as well, Nick, that surely if it's coordinated culture and tourism, in any kind of, particularly, I assume coastal town councils, maybe Sarah, like yours, can yield dividends, especially if there's partnership going on between the principal authority, if possible, and the bigger town councils, can yield massive dividends for the local economy as well. So, I mean, I think that seems to make sense from this end, from what you're saying. Listen, thanks to the lady who posted that question. I've got, so Sylvia Tillax has posted 2 or 3 questions, but the first one, we're going to ask 2 of Sylvia's questions. The first one is a generally applicable one, I think, which keeps disappearing because people keep on helpfully posting questions on here. I'll try to get it back up. And so also, Nick, do have a stab at answering it if you can, but it's maybe a bit more technical. Linda, if you want to have a go first at answering this, do you need to set up a separate account to manage grant funds separate from the precept account? So I guess largely for yourself and Sarah, but Nick, you might also want to comment from an Exmouth perspective too.
Are we
Linda?
talking about bank accounts? So if bank accounts,
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But also here talking about how you actually account separately for grant funds for projects separate to the precept.
So we wouldn't have a separate bank account for a project, whether it's a 20,000 or a several £1 million one. We wouldn't have a separate bank account. We would keep the minimum in our current bank account and put the rest into investment for however long before we need it. In relation to management accounts, so what you report, then you would presumably, I would have a different coding system for that grant, so you can easily demonstrate to your funders, to the public, to everybody else, what money is coming in and what money is going out, especially in the bigger places when you may have funding coming in from 5 or 6 different sources. You have that. Not quite often it's retrospectively as well, so you pay out the grants and then you have to claim from several different people, and you claim a percentage of them, so 10% of one, 10% of another, and that needs to be a very clear audit trail. So you would do that in your management accounts separately, but I wouldn't have a separate bank account.
Agree with what Linda's said. Yeah,
that's something that you would do, managing the large sums of money you are with grant funds, Sarah, at Lowestoft. Yeah. I think the looking at rereading this, I think the insinuation behind the question is about the management of grant funds. Once you've got them into an account, how you actually literally manage them and account for them, presumably from any audit perspective, as opposed to contributions. Touching on your presentation, Linda, that the precept itself might be being used to match fund the same project. You know what I mean? So I think that's maybe where Sylvia was coming from there. But no, you've both answered that question brilliantly. Nick, any advice, perhaps based on the Exmouth perspective on this? Handling funds grant funds once you've been in receipt of them.
No, I wouldn't add anything to that. No, it's normal. Officers handle that. It's just done normally. Yeah. Okay.
Understood. Okay, and again, presumably, as with accounting for staff time, Sarah, depends who the grant funder is and what their prescriptions are, way they want things reported, and how often and in what format. Okay, let's move on to the second one of Sylvia's questions, which is an interesting one. It says, in a small rural parish, we have residents who have asked if they can make donations for specific things and activities. Is this allowed? So I'm assuming that this is to do with
Section 136, isn't it? Power to accept a gift.
Very possibly, you know far more about that, Sarah, than do I. But I'm assuming
my fellow clerk Linda will concur. Section 136, power to accept a gift.
Absolutely, I take money from anyone, frankly.
Yes, yes, please. Legal power is Section 136.
Section 136 of the Local Government Act 1972. That's just preceding the famous Section 137. And I'm assuming that Sylvia is asking that question in terms of donations. Yeah, it's just for specific things and activities, maybe projects, which is, I guess, what's triggered that question from this.
It's not always just money, because when I worked for a very small parish, literally a lifetime ago, it could be that the farmer was offering to cut all the hedges, etc., with their equipment instead of us having to buy that in. So that's a gift as well. It's costed, and we recognise that, right back to when that was a very small parish, similar to what's being discussed. So it's not just money. Sometimes, these offers from an accountant or a surveyor or something can save you huge amounts of money, and we always monetize them. We always cost them and put them into our accounts.
Yeah, so it can be almost in kind as well, which I guess is where Sylvia's coming from. Nick, any final parting shots on that? From an Exmouth perspective?
Well, not not in terms of finance, but from a district perspective, I must say that cultural activities in rural areas and small villages are as important as they are in towns and cities. We have a little program in East Devon called Villages in Action that's run by a very enthusiastic volunteer, and the impact that she has in small rural communities is immense, and it is something that's well worth supporting if you can, because it is valuable. Thank you.
Absolutely, and of course, last time I looked, about 70% of parish councils were what DEFRA at one point were defining as rural. So I think we need to remember that, and we know that there are 6,000 parish councils covering villages, so that's even more important. A whole gamut, Nick, within our sector of the size of parish and council. Right, moving on down. I believe we had another question here, which actually is a question from Peter Lappin, and I think it may have been directed at either Sarah or Linda initially, but it's to do with the asset register. So, and it could link guys to the transparency code. But Sarah, is your council's asset register required to be in the public domain, i.e., on your website, for example?
Yes, and it is, yeah.
So, Linda, I assume.
Yes, it's in public domain. Yeah,
absolutely. So hopefully that answers Peter's question. Does the same apply at district level? Do you know, Nick, whether or not the district council's assets have to be included on a register and sort of published? I would assume that the same would apply, would it, at district level?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again? Do district councils?
Well, whether from your portfolio perspective, whether any East Devon District Council assets that it owns, cultural or otherwise, whether they have to be listed on an asset register and uploaded to the council's website, really. Does it apply? It seems to apply at town council level.
Yes. Oh, yes. They're just assets. They're just handled as assets. Yes. I mean, at district level, the maintenance of assets, one of the problems we have is that our assets are quite old and they are becoming expensive to maintain. So yes, they are absolutely held within the asset register.
Fantastic, that's great. Okay, moving on down. I'm glad that the anonymous attendees question has received 4 upvotes, because that was on the list to ask next. That was a good question. Again, linking kind of experience from that person's council. I assume it's just got disappeared again. I'll just have to bring that back up. We're considering a public works loan application, but the time period to pay, well, that's known. Yeah. So I assume this is a question aimed either at Sarah or Linda. How many years, if your councils have applied for PWLB loans, how many years was your loan taken out for, and what's the impact on the precept, I think is what's meant here. So maybe was that you, Sarah?
It could be, yeah. Our public works loan we haven't drawn down on yet. We keep thinking the world might become a better place and the interest rates might go down. Again, when we first started our business plan, the interest rate offered by public works loans was a lot less than is at the moment. So we haven't drawn down on it yet. It will be 50 years. Servicing of the loan, we've got a council position that it won't impact on the precept. So we're in rented accommodation at the moment, so savings from our office rental here will go towards servicing the loan. We're going to have some anchor tenants in the town hall as well, and the town hall has got a very robust business plan that it has to deliver some income to service the loan as well.
Fantastic, that's really helpful. Linda?
So we took out a public works loan board for the new centre we built a couple of years ago, and we took out a £1.4 million loan, 2%, which is lovely when it was 2%. We took it out for 25 years. It cost £70,000 a year repayment, but the centre gains income to pay for that, so it doesn't impact the precept.
So Linda's 2.2 is now 6.7, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
I grabbed it when we could.
Well done.
NALC works very closely with MHCLG and with county associations whose job it is to oversee the applications, as you know, sent into central government, or the central government that approves them. But yeah, we have seen quite a few of these applications going in, particularly, I think, if I'm right in saying, from larger councils, from town councils, and who knows, as Nick rightly mentioned, LGR, before local government organisation. You mentioned it in your slide, Sarah. Asset transfer. There's an online event we've got later in the year on asset transfer, which is going to be hugely tinted and influenced by LGR, I think, and we'll certainly see whether PWLB rears its head again there, because I think we're going to see probably, just my view, an increase again in those loans, withstanding the interest rate. Nick, any experience you've got either at town council level or from an East Devon perspective on public works loans applications?
No, that's something I would leave to my Section 151 officer and his team. That's a aspect. I mean, it all ties into what sort of budget you have, and the aim for us is absolutely to have a balanced budget. So there are public works loan board loans, but they're not for cultural assets at the present time.
Yeah, am I right in thinking it's largely for capital projects, Sarah?
Yes, it would be for capital projects. Yes. Yes.
So
we may be doing that, because we are putting in a new leisure facility with a pool in a brand new town that's being built in East Devon. But how a shortfall in funding is made up, that's again a Section 151 officer. This is way out of my league. I don't go anywhere near it. I just deal with the culture and concentrate on that. That's the most important thing for me. Right. Okay.
I know, and we've learned an awful lot from you today. It's technical, as Sarah said and Linda has said. And it probably explains the popularity of today's event, because town councils, parish councils can't any longer just rely on their precept. They need to be more inventive than that. Look, thanks to the anonymous submitter of that question. That was a good question. There's another one here I've just happened upon from Joanne Broughton, which is quite a simple one, but actually it's maybe one, Nick, you want to have a stab at first. I don't know, but it says, what can we do when our county council are not distributing our Section 106 funds? We've picked up, the LGA did a very interesting letter, an open letter to government on permitted development rights last week, explaining that, it supported a reduction in the use of permitted development rights, so that more planning permissions could be granted, land banking could be averted, and more housing built generally. Bit of a separate point to today's event, but actually part of that, I think, was that certain principal authorities, planning authorities, aren't really using Section 106 funds because permitted development rights are being used instead. So community benefits to create infrastructure, sometimes cultural, Nick, in certain areas, isn't being allocated. NALC co-signed that letter, our chair did. And I think that the powerful point about community benefit, so new playgrounds, whatever it might be, in areas not being built, because permitted development rights, are almost a route to the back door to build, don't require SIL or S106 to be triggered, is something that I think there's a powerful view on at this end. But is that something that's occurred in East Devon, Nick? I don't know if you're in a position to comment on that. Does your council distribute Section 106 and for community benefit? And if so, do you tend to know what kind of projects towards?
Yes. We've had a lot of development in East Devon over the years. Our rate of growth is double the national average. So there's a lot of SIL and S106, and there's a very clear programme at district level in deciding where that money is spent, and part of that money is dispersed to town councils, who make their own decisions about how they want to spend their S106 money.
That's massively helpful. Thanks. Linda, I know you mentioned, is it SIL that your council has got?
We have both. Chris, while I'm doing this, something coming up on the chat about a question for small parishes. If you could look while I'm answering this. There's
problem.
So Section 106, I think we do have funds from Section 106, but it's not as easy and as transparent as most of us would like. And to be fair, we are working with our district council on that to try and make it better. I think you almost have to turn into a private investigator in our case to find out what those Section 106 are and where what developments they relate to, and then check especially the timescale, because they only last for a few years and then they go back to the developers. They're not spent. So I would suggest you try and pester your members at the district or wherever it is to get that information if it's not readily available. From the other perspective, what we've tried to do over the last few years is, when there is a large development, we have been clear in saying what is needed for this infrastructure, for this development is ABC, whether it's a small playground, whether it's an allotment, whatever it is. And so that gives a heads up to the officers who are negotiating with the developers about Section 106. This is what the community needs, rather than complaining afterwards and saying we didn't get the opportunity to put that in. So we try and front end it a bit, not very successfully, but that's what we try and do.
No, fantastic. Yes, I've seen the post in the chat and acutely sensitive to that. Section 106, is generally applicable, though it's not something which, has been said generally, town councils alone can be recipients of. So I mean, particularly in your answer, Sarah, have you guys in Lowestoft received any Section 106? And do you happen to know, for example, if and how any smaller councils in the surrounding area to Lowestoft have been beneficiaries of any either grant funding generally for areas or S106?
No, we've received some SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, which we had to bid for out of the district pot, but there's no 106. So mindful of the questions that seem to be coming through about smaller parishes, I'm also clerk because I just don't get around to giving it up to a very small parish in mid Suffolk, who's got a council of 8 and a budget of 8,000, and they've been successful in obtaining some funding for their village hall. I don't know, I haven't quite read the thread of the questions that are coming through, but I can see there's some concern that smaller parishes would like to hear more about achieving funding, is it? And most of the funding that this particular parish has achieved for its village hall has been in terms of renovating the village hall. But from the green angles, they've been really fortunate in getting funds from either wind turbine community funds or the district council's green initiative funds, things like that. I don't know if that's anything that anyone's asking questions about. Chris, I can't keep up with the chat, but
no, absolutely, there it is. And actually, acutely aware that whilst funding, and the precept are principles which can generally apply to all sides of council. And Nick, you'll be aware as well. There's a huge spectrum of different sizes of council across England, ranging from 150. I think this is the smallest in. I think was it Shearsby in Leicestershire, all the way up to I'm guessing Linda. Northampton, I think, with population 120,000. So it's often difficult for us to get scale. But actually beyond the principles of it, there is a question here. I'll ask you, Linda. Actually,
can I just answer? Carry on. Sarah said about the small parishes. You don't end up normally working for a large parish unless you've gone through a lot of small parishes. And I've worked from parishes for 250 population, and funding is more crucial then. And I'm sorry if you think this, to those who are watching, think this is irrelevant. I would ask you to look back at my slides, because they are not all about big projects. They are about how you can look beyond the precept. So if you have a small play area that needs refurbishing, or as we mentioned, you need help with cutting the play area hedges, there are other ways to do it rather than very grand big schemes. And these are tips for that, which are not about £1 million projects. They're about how you can look at things differently for your project, however small it is. If it, as I say, when I was with a small council, the project may have been a £10,000 play area, which I know is a lot, and we didn't have £10,000, so we would have had to go out and to seek that money from elsewhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had a play area or a bus shelter or whatever it was. So I think some of the examples you've been shown are large, but the principles apply from whether you want a very small project up to a large one, really. I would suggest they looked at.
Yeah.
I would
recently, sorry, Chris, I think there's something came up about no assets. You don't even have to have assets to seek funding. Another very small parish that I work for managed to get £150 to fund a dog poo bin out of a Pride in Place grant that a district council was offering. You know, they had a post, that's all they needed. It wasn't about play parks, it wasn't about village halls, it wasn't about town halls. There was external funding out there to buy something as simple as a waste bin.
Or events. You know,
no, exactly. I'll completely agree, and I'll bring Nick in a minute. I think it is about principle. It's also, as we said, about the staff time aspect as well. Looking for those funding pots, some of which you've listed in your slide deck, Linda, that different size of parish and town councils can apply for. SIL and so the Community Infrastructure Levy in Section 106 should apply to smaller parish councils as well as larger councils. That is the case, isn't it, Nick? That it doesn't just apply to larger councils. It's not precluding smaller parish councils. So if smaller councils can apply for them, make sure you can get it. Sorry, over to you, Nick. Sorry. Yeah, okay. No, if you didn't want to come in, that's fine. But I was going to say the question from David Carter, which is an excellent one, but it's actually a micro parish. So we've got a micro councils network, which is for NELC, which is literally for councils which can't do much with a budget of under £10,000. And it sounds like David's council here is such a council, precept less than £7,000. Most of that going on the clerk's salary, presumably. What can such councils do to increase revenue? You've all covered it to an extent. Last year, David says, saw a 32% precept rise, and they want to try to start alternative cash sourcing. Very few assets, and street letting is very costly drain when these things fail. But what you're all reiterating, really, and I don't know, I will bring you in, Nick, if you've got anything to add to this, but it sounds from what Sarah and Linda are saying as though don't be inhibited. Don't just assume that because the examples a bit today have been given from clerks to larger or super councils, that that those principles don't apply to small and medium councils, because they do. They're just bigger projects. But Nick, any final comments in answer to that?
No, not really. I think it just depends on how you organise your area, your district. My district does excuse me, my district does download funds to parish councils, and then quite often will carry out the work on their behalf. And it's just how it's organised at local levels. That's all I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. Linda, any final comments in response to David's question? I mean, obviously you've been, in days of yore, you were clerk to smaller councils. So, I mean, awards for all, is that something that smaller councils also could apply to?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would say there's a question coming up about where's there's a list. Your county council or your unitary, I don't know what your principal council is, they should be producing a monthly newsletter on grants available, often which are nothing to do with, so for example, a very good one I've used for small council was the Birmingham Hospital Fund, which is something like £1,000 or something, and they give out money for small organisations and etc. So there's a whole list of them. There is a national grant thing which sometimes you have to pay, but I think the county council, I would talk to your county councillor or equivalent and ask if you can get on that distribution list or your calc, and they should be sending it to you. And then, because they change so quickly, if NELC published a list today, it wouldn't be up to date in a month's time or whatever. And sometimes these grants have very short lead-in times, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to do something. So you need to know as soon as possible. So I would suggest, one simple thing you can do is talk to your calc or somebody and try to get on that distribution list so you know what is available.
There are two things I think I would add to that, Linda. One is, especially from a smaller council's perspective, and especially a micro council's perspective, your council can always add value either in partnership or by applying for some of these grants, themselves. But equally, don't just assume that you can't just because you don't be limited by the precept. I think that's the point that's trying to be made. The point that comes up time and again at our micro councils network, all we're able to do is just pay the clerk and that's it, and comply with audit requirements, and I'm sure that's the case in many cases. But if your council does have ambitions, there's a burning service, whatever, that you really do need to deliver, manage an asset, save an asset, whatever, don't be limited. Look into these and look into the small print of these grants and make sure, as Linda rightly said, that you're on, what grants are out there, awards for all or others, so that you know that you're eligible before you decide psychologically that you can't apply. Sarah, final comment from yourself.
If you don't ask, you don't get.
That seems an incredibly useful summation of what Nick, Linda, and yourself have said. I'm no expert on funding. Today, it has been a very popular event, but I'm acutely sensitive to the needs of smaller councils. Of course, we are at NELC. Having said that, it's making sure you're informing yourselves, making sure you're on the relevant mailing lists, and that you persuade councillors, if you're a clerk, to apply for those grants, and being proactive. And actually, Sarah and Linda, sometimes partnering with town councils in a kind of hub and spoke, approach to do that, and with your principal authority. If you don't,
I know every county is obviously structured differently, and not every county's got the 3-tier system that we've currently, I add, got in Suffolk. But East Suffolk Council were incredibly supportive to us. They have an officer whose sole job is to get grants and do funding applications. So do reach out and collaborate. They've got the expertise on filling in these lengthy forms and providing the funding language that's required. You can't expect a small parish with 8 councillors and a parish clerk working 4 hours a week to have the time or expertise. So reach out and collaborate, either through your calc or through one of your principal authorities. There should be the expertise there to help you. So at the end of the day, you're all there to serve the electorate in whatever shape or form it is.
And
that's fantastic.
Sometimes they're really looking for that community angle to be added to their funding bids. So actually, they probably need you as much as you need them.
Absolutely, and that's interesting to hear you affirm that, Nick, from a principal authority perspective. Yeah, look, and just a final comment. NELC is certainly not only encouraging larger councils to apply for funding or use the beyond the precept methodology. That's not the case. It's there are something like 1,000 to 2,000 town councils. There are 6,000 smaller councils, and there are probably a couple of thousand in between. So today's event has been for everyone.